Hello and welcome to episode 52.
Yay.
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 Wow, terrible. Anyway, this time we're talking about B&M.
B&M? I
Yep.
found that really hard to say.
Why?
It's like munu. It's like that kind of thing.
Do you know what B&M's actual name is?
Bolliger
Mm-hmm.
and...
And what?
I do know it. What is it? Bolliger and... I feel like it's like Marlowe or something.
Not M-A, yeah. But not... Yeah.
I don't know.
Mabiard.
Ah, that's it.
There's, people often dispute how it's said. Obviously, because...
It's pronounced in a different language, probably.
Yeah. So the people are Swiss, right?
Yeah.
So
there's probably like a Swiss way to say it, and then like an English / everyone else just butchering it way to say it.
Well, Switzerland hasn't got their own language,
Yeah.
have they? It's like German
or French.
Yeah. So I think they're more French. But
yeah, they sound French.
But yeah, you get a lot of pronunciations like Bolliger.
Bolliger.
Yeah, Bolliger, Mabillard.
Mabillard. It's like mallard duck.
Yeah. But yeah. So I tried to find the correct pronunciation. The most like English way to say the correct version, I think, is Bolliger and Mabillard.
Mabillard, yeah.
You know.
It'd be like Mabillard.
Yeah, exactly.
Or something.
So obviously that's just an English pronunciation of probably what the correct way would be. Much more French, probably.
This is where they're like actually like German speaking.
Yeah, they could be. I don't know. Somewhere between, probably a hybrid of the two anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they're Swiss.
Do you know what the full names of the people? So Bolliger and Mabillard are two people, right?
Second names.
They're both second names. So something Bolliger and something Mabillard. It's Walter Bolliger.
Walter.
And Claude Mabillard.
Claude. Okay, Claude's quite German, isn't it? So maybe.
I don't know.
Claude is German.
There you go.
Who knows? Or maybe it is French. I don't know.
Claude sounds French to me.
I don't know.
Anyway, so yeah, that's
Walter and Claude. They should have called it that instead.
Walter Bolliger and Claude Mabillard. Do you like that? But,
yeah, it should have been Walter and Claude, but
it really shouldn't. But obviously, in the enthusiast world, no one calls them Bolliger and Mabillard. So it's B&M. Just like RMC is RMC.
Yeah.
You know, anything that can be shortened does get shortened.
Well, it's like M&S, isn't it?
Yeah.
You don't go around like Marks and Spencer's.
No. So, yeah. So that's the kind of name of them. It's kind of an interesting history. So...
Were they friends then? Or just business partners?
They were both engineers who worked at a company called Giovanola.
Okay.
And Giovanola fabricated rides for Intamin at the time.
Okay.
So Intamin would... This is a bit messy, right? But Intamin started out as like, we sell other people's rides. And then Intamin started to design rides, but then get them to be fabricated by someone else.
Yeah.
Like they do now.
Yeah.
And Giovanola was the person making the track off Intamin's design to create the ride, right? And Bolliger and Mabillard were the people working at
that company.
I
think we mentioned that when we talked about Intamin before.
Yes. And at Giovanola, they had that box-shaped track design, which I think is theirs, right? Which was Walter's and Claude's, perhaps. But
they designed it.
I don't know, to be 100% sure, but Giovanola would use that. Mm-hmm. So then some Intamin rides use that, like Shockwave at Drayton Manor. Mm-hmm. Looks like it's a B&M, but it's
not.
Intamin.
Yeah.
Built by Giovanola, fabricated by Giovanola. But they didn't want that, so they left. In 1987, they left to create their own business, Bolliger and Mabillard Consulting Engineers. They didn't want to make amusement rides, they wanted to avoid it completely.
That worked out, didn't it?
Yeah, so the first thing they did was create a rotating platform for a restaurant on top of a Swiss mountain.
What?
Yeah.
So they're just being engineers now?
Yeah. But then a park called Six Flags Great America wanted B&M to make some new trains for a roller coaster at the park. And for some reason they agreed to it.
That's a bit random how they
we'll make some trains.
Well, they picked them even though they weren't established as their own company, like doing stuff yet.
Yeah, but obviously they might have known that had some connections to them.
Yeah, maybe they worked with them before or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then at the same time, the same park were looking to build a new roller coaster, and the park initially offered B&M, Walter and Claude the opportunity to make a roller coaster for them.
Design it and build it from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But obviously it wasn't a roller coaster company at that point in time, so they didn't have any kind of connections or setup. So they could design the ride, but they couldn't build it or fabricate it. So obviously what they did was they looked for a company who could fabricate the ride for them. And because the ride was being built in America, they chose a company in America to fabricate it.
Right.
Which is Clermont Steel Fabricators, which is where all B&M track is still fabricated today.
Okay.
So they did it, and it was a ride called Iron Wolf, which was their first roller coaster, opened in 1990.
Is that still up today?
No.
Ah.
And it's a stand-up roller coaster, which is why it wasn't up today. And that brings me to this point. How many different types of B&M roller coasters do you know? So the stand-up is one. There are
0.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 types of B&M roller coaster.
Okay,
Some
inverted.
of them obvious. Inverted, yes. That on 2.
And okay, sit down.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
sit
I'm
down,
saying
yeah.
phrases. I don't
Sit
know.
down,
if
yeah. That's one.
Okay. I don't think they have a spinning, do they?
No spinning.
I feel like I'm out of roller coaster types now.
You're definitely not. Just think of, the UK has a lot of B&Ms in it. Think of different types of B&M.
Oh, flying.
Flying.
Okay.
So you've got stand up, sit down, inverted and flying. So you're 4 out of 9.
Okay.
Keep thinking
Launch?
UK. No, not as its own unique model. There's still 2 more types in the UK alone.
Who's got a B&M? We've done this before, and I just.
Who has got a B&M?
Okay, well.
There's only 2 parks in the UK that have B&M.
Alton Towers and Thorpe Park.
Yes.
I've done flying.
Yeah.
They've got another B&M.
So you already got inverted as well. Well, it's
Yeah.
Nemesis Inferno. You've got Galactica. Both parks have
Oh, do you know what it is? I was thinking of wing
wing.
when I said flying.
Yeah.
That's what's confusing me.
Wing.
Okay, wing.
Sounds the Swarm.
Dive.
Dive, yep. So now you're on 3 more to go. I reckon you can get one of the 3.
Do they have like a water?
No.
Okay.
You got to think bigger now.
Hyper.
Yep. And then the remaining 2, one of them is pretty obscure and the other one is not as obscure.
4D.
No. It's flawless.
Okay.
So it's like the sit down but without.
A floor.
Yeah. And family coaster.
Okay.
Which is built like 2 of. I mean, when you look at and kind of consider all of the different types of rides, they're all very similar. They're all like large scale rides that are almost predictable and reliable and have high throughput.
Yeah.
Like none of the rides have particularly short trains. They're all, well, most of them are 4 across at least,
Mm-hmm.
So they're all like high capacity rides.
That's like when I think of B&M, I think of like they make basic roller coasters. Like if you think of a roller coaster, that's the kind of thing they make. They don't make anything pretty crazy or like wild. They just make quality, solid coasters that are like not boring but like standard.
Yep, and that's definitely true. That is how it is. But then, there's a reason that they're so successful. When you look at the different types of roller coasters that they build, Wing Coaster, exclusively B&M. Intamin tried to build a wing coaster, didn't really go that well. Hypercoaster, completely dominated by B&M, easily. Dive Coaster, obviously B&M, pretty much. Gerst have kind of started to go into it, but it's still not as much. Flying Coaster was dominated until Fly came about, but then still, there's only one. B&M is still the manufacturer. Inverted Coaster, obviously there are other ones, like Facuma's SLCs, but B&M are known to be the best ones. So you got 5 of those 9 models. B&M pretty much have, their coasters are the ones.
Yeah,
exactly.
And those are like core rides that most parks have at least one of those types.
Oh, definitely. There are parks of multiple. You've got to think. Alton Towers alone has 3 of them, and then there's many other parks that have, a hypercoaster and inverted coaster, or a dive coaster and inverted coaster. Cedar Point has 3: wing, dive, inverted, and flawless now. It wasn't stand up. So, this is it. Like, we talk about B&M, as you said, kind of being perhaps a bit boring, and people say that it's boring, but they're very good at what they do, and you can see that they're very good based on the fact that they dominate, like, a lot of the markets that they're in.
Yeah. Because, like, yeah, it's boring, but it's, like, good. Do you know what I mean?
It's boring, right? But it works. And this is the thing. Parks will pay for rides that work.
Well, it's just you trust them to build a solid ride.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, like, if you go for something crazy or, like, intimate, where they're just, out here doing crazy things, you don't really know what you're getting.
No.
It could be amazing, but it could be a bit weird.
You don't know what you're getting. You don't know how reliable it's going to be. And you don't know how much Intamin have lied to you. Because Hagrid's... Well, Intamin basically says that every ride they ever build has a better throughput than it really does.
Right.
So Hagrid's was meant to be able to do more than it can. Lots of their coasters are like that, where they said, oh, you're going to get... You could be able to push this many people through the ride. Yeah. And then it's like 2/3 of that in reality.
So overestimating what they can do.
And then they don't work all the time. Hagrid's obviously didn't work. Fair play, because it's like such a massive ride to begin with. But then, their rides just are temperamental. You look at the two most temperamental rides at Alton Towers, 13 and Rita.
Yeah.
Intamin.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen Nemesis, Galactica, or Oblivion go down at Towers.
So ever. They don't go down a lot. Like, Galactica has had periods of downtime, but usually it's when something's broken. Mm-hmm. Like the chain lift motor kept going at one point in time.
So like pieces of the ride are broken.
Yeah, and Oblivion's had that as well.
Right.
But
the operation of it,
yeah,
you can be like, we're back up.
Even if it goes down, Oblivion is a really hard one because there is not many times where that ride it was randomly closed.
The only time it's gone down in quotation marks is when they have to go up and sort something out. This
is it, right? They're just reliable rides that work. And especially if you could afford a ride like this and it's going to work.
That is an investment.
It's an investment, for sure.
A quality investment.
Exactly. And that's the point. But then,
that's why I think, not everybody has to be... This is, the main point of our whole, podcast. We was everybody's different. Everybody's different. And these people are, the solid, quotation marks, boring ones, but you have to have one in your park.
Yeah.
You have to have, standard rides that are reliable, and then you can have a wacky, crazy one as well. Mm. It's all part of the mix of what's going on, but they've just always seemed like they really had their stuff together.
Well,
they know what they're doing.
They have from the start. This is it. B&M came about in a time, the early 90s, where aerodynamics was still knocking around, building Jancast coasters.
Yeah.
It's like Magnum XL 200 was built a year before. The big one opened at the same time as Nemesis.
Lol.
Nemesis is still good today.
Yeah.
As in the design of it, right? The big one's design philosophy is absolute garbage.
Yeah.
It's outdated as hell.
That's another thing, I think a good word is classic. And timeless. It just all their rides, almost, even though they're kind of gimmicky. For example, dive coasters. There was a time where everyone wanted a dive coaster or whatever. And now we've kind of moved on from it, but they're still great. Then you don't look at it and go, oh, that's 90s. No. That's I don't want to go on that anymore. That's rubbish.
Dive coasters are an interesting one. Oblivion was built in 98, and I think the second dive coaster was built in maybe 2001. Oblivion was built in 98. The second one was built in 2000, which was a clone of Oblivion. But then no one really bought one after that until 2005, when Busch Gardens bought SheiKra. Mm-hmm. And at that point, things started to change. So there's a period of 7 years where nothing really happened. But especially more recently, they built a dive coaster in 2 in 2015, 1 in 2016, 3 in 2018, 1 in 2019, and 1 is opening this year in 2021.
So they're coming back now.
Yeah, this is it.
Big time.
This is because more people have been buying them.
Yeah.
Especially Hyde Park, when they built Crake, which is a smaller version of the dive coaster.
Yeah.
That's a very popular ride that led to things like Baron, Oblivion the Black Hole, Valkyria. an Emperor now, the latest one.
But so. think of like a say Vekoma ride that was built in 2000, a type of ride.
Why? What's your point?
I'm just trying to do an example that looking at another manufacturer, it might be a ride where you just think, I'd never get that now. I'd never buy that for my park. Do you see what I mean? Like their designs, although they may seem boring, are like stand the test of time really well.
Yeah, definitely.
And also, it's actually mad to think about how Big One was built at the same time as Nemesis, because how smooth is Nemesis?
Exactly. Very.
Like, the smoothness of their rides hasn't really changed because it was 100% smooth in the beginning.
And this is it, like, that was 4 years after the company built their first roller coaster.
That is insane.
Arrow was building rides
for ages, right?
It started in the 50s, I think.
Yeah. How did they do that?
Quality engineering.
Yeah.
And very low tolerances, high tolerances. I never know which one is it.
Don't know.
The tolerances have to be very small.
Okay.
So low?
I don't know.
But yeah, no, they're expensive, and that's why, because all the tolerances are low, very small, so they have to be within a few millimeters rather than a centimeter.
Yeah.
And that really changes how smooth and well designed a ride is.
Are any of the other like CEOs or whatever of the other manufacturers engineers?
They probably all are.
Okay.
I don't know, to be honest.
It just seems like they really knew what they needed to do to make a good product. If they made one roller coaster and then 4 years later they made Nemesis, like they didn't even make any mistakes really.
No.
They just went, here we go.
Well, the only mistake they made was building stand-up roller coasters, but that was just a fad of the time. Yeah. So it wasn't really a mistake. You can see they just progressed very quickly, as in the first few rides were a bit like, oh, okay,
yeah, finding their feet.
As soon as they built the first inverted coaster in 92, so 2 years after they built the first coaster, they built the inverted coaster, which was what hadn't been seen before. At that point, they kind of knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
But the first few rides weren't as good as they are now. They're kind of a different vibe almost.
Yeah.
Which was weird, but yeah, it is crazy to see them just pop up.
Yeah.
But that's because they've been doing it for a while.
Yeah, I guess they had the experience there before.
You see that a lot in wooden roller coaster manufacturers. Stuff like Gravity Group and Great Coaster International. Both of them were formed from engineers of previous wooden coaster manufacturers who went on to build their own companies. So they could just start.
I guess the thing is that you work in that industry and you get used to everything, and then you spot the problems and you figure out how to fix it. So then you're like, okay, I can go off and do this now. This
is it. There would have been perhaps fabricating rides for a while and dealing with all of the design
mistakes,
stuff. Yeah. Exactly. So they would have known what they were doing. But B&M are leaders in many of their models, but they're not leaders in all of their models. So we talk about B&M's expensive. They built a family coaster. I don't know why you'd want to buy a B&M family coaster. No. Because you could buy something...
It's really not worth the money.
No, you could buy something from Vekoma, which is way cheaper, and you'd probably get the same ride.
Yeah.
And then the other two stand-up coasters are not really a thing anymore. They were a thing of the past, which everyone got wrong. It's not like a B&M thing. Everyone who built stand-up coasters, they're kind of going out of fashion.
Realised they were a bad idea.
Yeah. But then... parks who had B&M stand-up coasters have been converting them to floorless ones instead. But then talking about that, the sit-down coaster and the floorless coaster, they were both kind of fads of their era as well. Even though the sit-down coaster is the generic model of roller coasters.
Yeah.
Everything's a sit-down coaster. The Smiler's a sit-down coaster. Taron's a sit-down coaster.
Yeah.
B&M... It was a cool thing at the time, but as soon as other companies started producing sit-down coasters, that wasn't Arrow, it kind of started to change.
Right.
It's if you go in your mind, I want a sit-down coaster with lots of inversions. In the 90s, you would have thought of B&M.
Right.
And you have rides like Dragon Khan at Portaventura, which is a huge sit-down coaster with 8 inversions. Today...
Go slower.
Exactly. You don't think of B&M.
No.
You think of Gerst or a different company who have made the sit-down coaster more flexible.
Right.
And that's the thing that B&M aren't, is flexible.
Yeah.
They're
they
not
stick to their guns.
Exactly. They're not going to change to suit your needs.
Mm-hmm.
They go, this is what you can have. If you want it, there you go.
And they can do that because they're so good.
Exactly. But
imagine having a rubbish coaster and being like, listen, here you go. You can't change it, but you can have it if you want. Yeah. You'd be like, what? They'd never succeed at all.
But it is interesting that the kind of most standard model is the one that they're not very successful with.
Yeah.
Anymore, at least.
Yeah.
But because it's been done by so many people and refined in different ways, it doesn't really perhaps make as much sense to get a B&M.
Well, especially as they're so expensive.
Exactly. You want to get something that you know is different and unique, and your money going to get your money's worth.
Yeah. Why
build a sit-down coaster where you could build a wing coaster?
Yeah.
You know? So, it's not to say that they didn't sell any. It's just that they kind of went out of fashion. So they built 5 sit-down coasters. They built 5 sit-down coasters. The last one was in 2008 for some reason. That was a weird choice. But 1993, 95, 99 and 2001. Mm-hmm. And then 2008. So it never really was a huge thing.
Yeah.
I guess because there were other options, right? You could go for an inverted coaster or something. They built more floorless coasters, which were basically the sit-down coaster, but with no floor.
Yeah.
But these were like a fad as well. So they built like 13 of them. 1 in 2000, 1 in 1999, 4 in 2000, 1 in 2001, 2 in 2002, 1 in 2003, 4, 5, and then it started to die off. Mm-hmm.
So they had a solid run with that one, though.
They had a solid run with that one, but the thing is, like, most parks can not, don't always have the space. B&M rides are big, big coasters. And a sit-down coaster, as we said before, you can get it from someone else who could build it smaller. Yeah. B&M could never make the Smiler. Mm-hmm. That's
Impossible.
Just a fact. Exactly. Yeah. So sometimes you're limited by who you can go with.
Yeah.
And then B&M are obviously expensive, so smaller parks who want a smaller scale sit-down coaster won't go with B&M.
Yeah.
They have to go with someone else. And then if we talk about flexibility, it just, you can't do as much with it. Mm-hmm. So...
interesting when you describe it that way, because it makes them sound like no one would ever go with them, just from what you say about they're not very flexible, they're huge, they're expensive, it just sounds ridiculous, but everyone goes for them.
It's like the whole thing of a brand, isn't it? You pay more for a brand that
and it's kind of like they're so good without being flexible that it's just an option that you'd go for. Well, I don't know how to describe it, but
perhaps the reason that they're good and reliable sometimes is because they aren't flexible.
Yeah, so you can change your parts, or you can make everything standardized and get it good. Yeah,
exactly. Things are standardized. They still list all of these models. They still list the stand-up coaster on their website,
and that's probably why they last so long as well. Because you can just continue to maintain it for a cheap price, or not a cheap price, but the price isn't going to go up because it's so old now that no one's doing it anymore.
This is it. Other companies, they have models that go out of fashion and they just get rid of them.
Yeah.
I think Intamin do that quite a lot. But B&M have kept their guns and these are the models we offer. If you build one, we're going to keep it.
Yeah.
So...
that's a really good selling point as well for a park, especially when you're spending that much money on it, to know that you're going to be able to have it for years and years or decades.
Yeah. And on top of the fact that there's only a handful of B&M rides that have ever been destroyed.
Really?
As in, taken down.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
That's actually hilarious.
Dueling Dragons at Universal's Islands of Adventure, there were 2 inverted coasters built in 1999. But obviously they're a theme park that operates all year round.
Yeah. And it's Universal. They've got the money to change that kind of
thing.
So
they got rid of them and put Hagrid's instead. Which made sense. They probably didn't have to get rid of them. As in, they probably could have sold them to another park.
Yeah.
But obviously, it's Universal. They're not going to sell 2 rides that were iconic to them.
Yeah.
Another one is Hulk as well at the same park. They retracked it.
Right.
So they took out the old track and put new track in. But there's not many B&M rides out there
that have been
altered. Or just taken down yet.
Yeah.
They've been moved, some have been moved from one part to the other, but not decommissioned completely.
Yeah.
Which is again,
That's
like,
really good.
rare
Yeah.
in the coastal world for that to happen.
That actually blows my mind a little bit.
But we're going to get to that point, you know.
Yeah,
the first ones were 1990s.
Yeah, soon.
Yeah, exactly. So I think some of the original ones might have been decommissioned at this point, like Iron Wolf. I forget which ones have been like moved.
Yeah.
Oh no, Iron Wolf is still a thing. It's now Firebird at
Okay.
Six Flags America. It's a floorless coaster. Yeah, floorless. So this is it. They're all still operating, but yeah, as I said, it's 31 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
That's
starting
really
to get
sad.
at the end of their like operating lives.
What will happen to them when they can't operate anymore? Will they like rust or what?
What do you mean?
Like what would make it so that they can't operate?
Well, like cracks
Okay.
in the track, or cracks in the supports.
So the metal work would just start
Yeah,
falling apart, basically.
Yeah, basically, it's no longer structurally sound, or not structurally sound enough for people to be riding it.
Right.
You know?
And
Like,
at that point, can you just retrack it and it'll be okay?
well, that's what they're doing.
Depending on the problem.
That's what they're doing with the big one, right?
Right.
They're retracking parts of it to improve it and make sure that it can stay around in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So they're having to be kind of preemptive with it a little bit. But yeah, you can do that. And that's what it did with the Hulk, not because it was getting old, but well, probably a little bit because it was getting old.
Just
but they wanted
in
to make
preparation,
it, yeah, exactly. So, you know, if Alton Towers wanted to keep Nemesis, they could just retrack it.
They'll retrack it.
I don't know.
100%
I think it's a
they
bad
will.
move to do
100% they will, though.
I really think it's a bad move.
What would they do? What would they put in there instead?
I don't know, but you just think Nemesis is like popular, sure, but it's not that popular.
No.
You know, if they retrack it, it's still going to be the same ride. It's going to decline in popularity for another 20 years.
Yeah.
You know.
Plus, like, when you rebrand something, for example, like with Galactica, it's only a short-term fix because people are so... Our attention spans are so short nowadays that it's like, maybe a couple of years everyone would be excited about it, but then they'll just be like, cool, and go back to the way it was before.
To be fair, Galactica's rebranding, it did work in terms of boosting up numbers. Even now that VR's gone, the numbers are still higher than they used to be. You know, it used to be that Nemesis and Air had like a 5 and 10 minute queue respectively. Mm-hmm. Now Nemesis is on like 5 and Galactica's on like 40.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see loads of different parks deciding what they're going to do with their B&M coasters when they slowly get too old.
Aw.
Yeah. But they built 120 roller coasters.
That's pretty mad.
Yeah.
There's 120 roller coasters and probably all of them are out there right now, like, doing fine.
I think 118 out of those 120 exist.
Wow.
I don't know if the two Dueling Dragons are what they call Dragon Challenge. Are they separate? Or they're one entity? So there's another one. I don't know whether the Hawk is classed as that.
That's actually blown my mind a little bit.
Yeah, they're all about rides.
They're all fine?
Yeah.
That's insane. And that's why people go with them, isn't it?
And Dragon Challenge would have been fine in any other park.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, that's a special case, isn't it?
Exactly. It's a special case.
Can we talk about... I could get this wrong. Isn't the Monster a B&M?
Yeah, the new one at
Guanaland. Because we were talking about how they can't really do tight spaces or they're so huge. But that one is, like, insane, right?
Yeah, but it's still big.
That's what I mean, but they've slotted it in between everybody else and it's gone underground or something.
Yeah, so the whole station's underground.
Right.
Because they don't have any space. So then it comes out of the ground. You remember the entrance to Groneland? People were telling me in Discord how to say it properly, and I've already forgotten how to say it properly.
Because it's got umlauts, right?
Yeah. It's not Grona, it's like
Groneland.
Something like that, and then it's like, not Lund, it's Lund.
Lund, oh
Double
God.
O instead of U.
Mate,
right?
it's Groneland.
No, well. Groneland.
Yeah.
The entrance, and then you have that ferry port.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure the
It's
drop
right
is
by
like
there.
right above the ferry port.
Yeah. Because it's by that snake ride.
Yeah, the snake
flat
ride was temporary.
Yeah,
so
it's
that's
that space.
Yeah, exactly. So,
I can't believe they're putting it in there.
Yeah, I think the benefit is that inverted track obviously sits on the inside, so helixes are almost tighter.
Yeah, because it's all in, doesn't stick out more.
No. But again, it's still huge.
Yeah.
Like, it's a big coaster.
And that park is already packed.
Yeah. But this is in an area of the park that isn't packed yet.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't really
Well,
been
it will
used.
be in a minute.
Exactly. But yeah, I mean, you're right, and they could still shove rides in, but it's not exactly it's not a huge B&M. It's relatively small in the grand scheme of things. And you can tell it's designed differently to fit the space.
So they've been flexible.
Well,
How much do you reckon they got paid to do that?
Well, I wouldn't call it being flexible. They can deal with different design layouts and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's more like...
the actual model.
Yeah, dealing with other things. But...
It's just funny to me, like, I don't know how they're going to fit a B&M in there. It doesn't really compute in my brain.
No.
Because B&Ms are always, like, on their own, like, huge, big things. They're quite, like, intimidating, really. Because they're, like, chunky, you know?
Yeah.
They look heavy.
They are chunky.
They're so beautiful, though. I actually love B&M.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy to see it just, like, sitting there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where it is. Yeah. Again, though, it's like not compact. When you look at other rides, like Jetline, think of how compact Jetline is.
Yeah.
You could probably fit like a few Jetlines in the space that you could fit Monster.
Yeah.
Well, not really, but you know what I mean. And so, yeah. I mean, you can do a lot with them. And I find that it's interesting that parks are still building inverted coasters.
Me too.
Even though, you know...
And it's interesting because I'm excited to go on Monster, even though I don't like inverted coasters. Do you see what I mean? But I'm just excited to see what it's like.
It's weird, isn't it? Like, they're from the 1992.
Yeah.
They were a fad in the 90s, and parks are still building them. Not at the same rate.
Yeah.
But they're still building them.
It does seem a bit like we've moved on from that, but then they are such like a staple model.
Yeah.
That you kind of have to have one if you haven't got one already.
Again, it's like a high throughput ride as well, isn't it? So
yeah,
reliable. You know it's going to work. You know it's going to entice people.
I feel like the average person also looks at it thinking, "Wow, that's cool." Like it looks like a scary ride from off-ride.
Definitely.
Because your feet are dangling, you're like swinging about. What do you reckon they'll do in the future then? Will they like just carry on as they are?
What, B&M?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a hard one to guess. With kind of, I don't know what they've got on their plate. Let's have a look. So they're building 4 rides for this year. Yeah, Emperor, a dive coaster at SeaWorld San Diego, Monster, the inverted coaster, Decepticoaster, which is a clone of the Incredible Hulk, but this time go to Universal Studios Beijing, and then a wing coaster going to Fantasy Valley in China.
Okay.
So they're busy. It's interesting because, like, when you look at the models and when they came out, there hasn't been a new one for a while. So there was quite a rush to build new models, like stand-up came and inverted came and then sit down and floorless and dive in 98, flying in 2002, hyper in 1999. So a lot of them came at the same time.
Yeah, within like 20 years. Not
like
20 years, 10 years.
10 years, most of them. Yeah, but then Wing Coaster was 2011.
Yeah.
Which is the newest. And now obviously we're in 2020.
That's 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Wow. But that's the thing, like, we've talked about this before, how I feel like we've done everything now. And only things like the passenger spoon, what's that ride called?
Oh, yeah. Axis coaster.
Yeah, the Axis stuff. Only stuff, like, weird things like that is going to be the next, like, new things, because we've done it all, surely.
Everyone wants them to do a large scale 4D coaster.
Oh, God.
Do what Arrow did and SNS now do with X2 and H and Ica, but get B&M to do it.
Smooth.
Exactly.
That would be insane.
You basically take the wing coaster and modify it to be 4D.
Right. Do you reckon they'll do it though? I feel like that's a bit much for them.
Everyone's thought, like, as soon as B&M were going to build a wing coaster, it was going to be a 4D coaster.
Oh, but it was just a wing coaster.
Yeah.
Of course it was. I don't know. They don't really need to do anything new.
Not yet.
At least for another 10, 20 years, probably. And yeah, it's not really their thing to like innovate in any weird ways.
No. They could be working on something though. You never know.
Imagine. I hope they are, because whatever they do, I feel like it would be great.
Yeah.
I just have a lot of faith in them.
Yeah, same. I do as well. It is interesting.
They don't even need to prove themselves by like doing anything new. That's the thing.
No.
Some of the other manufacturers, you're like, oh, well, they need to do something soon because it's getting a bit boring or whatever. But with them, it's just like, carry on.
Yeah. And even then, like, if they put out something new, like the wing coaster, Merlin snapped up the wing coaster straight away.
Yeah.
And built like 3 of them very quickly.
Yeah.
So they had entire faith in the model was going to be good.
Of course they did. Look what else they've got from B&M.
Exactly. So, yeah.
Whatever they do will be a success, and everyone will love it. And it'll be very, very expensive.
Yeah. One final point I want to make is, like, it's just funny. Some parks it's funny that, like, Hershey Park built a hypercoaster, Sky Rush by Intamin, and then, like, 5 years later, I forget when Sky Rush opened, but 5 years later, then bought another hypercoaster by B&M.
I think you mentioned this before.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
It's just like you're basically building the same, well, kind of the same ride. They're 2 completely different rides, you know. But it just makes you like think: is that what you wanted to have to begin with, and then didn't get?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It's just kind of.
Or maybe they were testing the waters with the cheaper one.
Why would they?
I don't know. It doesn't make any sense why you'd have 2 of the same thing.
A Sky Rush is meant to be too intense for most people, allegedly.
Right.
So yeah, it's just it's kind of funny. And then even then, you've got stuff like parks have technically 2 hypercoasters. So you've got stuff like Carowinds has Intimidator, a hypercoaster, and then Fury 325, which is a giga coaster, but it's the same model as Intimidator. They're the same.
So 2 rides the same, but one's bigger.
One's bigger, and they have different design like philosophies. So the hypercoaster has large hills, but large hill after large hill after large hill, whereas the giga coaster is more about like swooping turns and kind of more low to the ground, fast elements. But they're the exact same model, and even then they're being used in different ways.
Yeah.
So you can even get like multiple rides out of the same model type. And we've seen that with other manufacturers like Gerstlauer's Infinity Coaster. There's a park in Finland, maybe, I think, Power Park.
Isn't it Poland?
No. Oh. Power Park, you have Junker, which is a launched Infinity Coaster, and then have some other silly name roller coaster that I'm forgetting the name of, but it's some sort of flying theme. Damn, it's like a plane. It's the name of a plane. I can't remember. But that's like just a normal lift hill one.
Right.
But that one doesn't go upside down. They're 2 like very different rides, but they're the same model.
Yeah.
And again, that's the same with B&M's Hyper and Giga. They're like the same
thing but different. The same but different.
It's kind of weird, you know. So you know, this is it. They're so flexible.
Yeah.
In some time, I mean, they're not flexible, but in other ways they are flexible. That you can build different types of rides out of them to the point where parks warrant having 2 of them.
In many ways, they're like the best kind of flexible in terms of like stability, because they're flexible enough that you can do different things, but it's still very reliable because the core is the same. Yeah,
this is it. The proven models, so you don't have to worry about anything like not working.
If I had a park, I'd definitely get a B&M, at least one.
Oh, same. For sure.
At least one, if not like 4.
I think I'd open a park with a B&M and a different ride. One like solid, this is going to work. Yeah. And a different one that's like,
interesting.
Ooh, I don't know if this is going to work.
Yeah.
You know, just to balance that.
It'd definitely be a good investment to start off a park with that.
Yeah. So you asked people to say what their favourite B&M coaster was and about it generally, but what's your favourite B&M coaster?
What's my favourite B&M coaster? That's a hard question. I'm going to say Swarm just because Swarm and B&M are like quite close to my heart because that's the first manufacturer I actually learnt about because Swarm used to be my favourite ride back in the day. And B&M is the reason that I actually figured out that I could like roller coasters because all of their rides were smooth, and that's all I ever wanted was for the ride to be smooth. So I'd say Swarm just because that, you know, it gave me faith that roller coasters could be nice rather than thinking I'm going to die all the time on them. So I say Swarm.
Now you've moved on to the new B&M Mac rides.
Yeah.
The B&M that isn't so
trendier
B&M.
one.
Yeah, weird.
Young and trendy.
A different B&M that covers all of Intamin's other models that B&M don't do, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I need my manufacturer to be smooth and reliable.
Yeah. Kazumi guessed mine and said, I think Harry's could be Silver Star, as he said he adored it in the last video. And you're right, it is Silver Star.
Is it? Okay.
I really, really want to get on some more hypercoasters.
Yeah,
I think
me too.
you'd love them.
I'm going to be so
I think
blown
they'd
away.
scare you though.
Yeah.
To hell.
But I'll get used to it.
Yeah. But
that's
fun.
like the only thing I haven't really done yet. That kind of, it's a new experience.
It is spooky.
Oh, don't you get me going.
It's spooky in a different way.
Yeah.
Like,
it's different.
Yeah, it's just a bizarre feeling to like, float over the hills. If we get on Shambhala, we definitely need to do like back row straight away because it's a different sensation. I rode
I'm gonna cry.
Silver Star like in the middle rows, and then we waited to ride in the back. It's just completely different. You know, it's so good.
How much room did you leave on your restraint?
Too much?
Too much. Surely that's really dangerous.
No.
Yes, it is.
You shouldn't do that.
Yeah, don't recommend.
No, you shouldn't do that.
Only leave a tiny bit.
You shouldn't leave any.
Yeah, but just leave a tiny bit.
You shouldn't leave any.
Okay, don't leave any. I never leave any, to be fair. I don't know what I'm talking about. I still feel the airtime, even though I'm like pinned in.
I mean, most rides now, you can't leave any.
Yeah.
Because they just come down anyway. Any hydraulic ones just...
Plus, the people doing it normally know, and they push it really hard.
Silas says, my favourite B&M is probably Black Mamba at Fantasyland. Front row only.
Okay.
I think in general they're good crowd pleasers, but in my opinion, definitely not the best. I have no idea what B&M will do besides the surf coaster. Oh god, the surf coaster.
What's that?
But I wouldn't mind a 4D B&M instead of a normal wing. So the surf coaster, I don't really know about it too much because it sounds like it's just complete BS, right? I genuinely don't know what it is properly.
At all?
No, like people were taking the mick with it, saying like it was a roller coaster that could be a sit down and inverted at the same time.
What are you talking about? How can it be? Do you mean it can change between, or at the same time it is both inverted and sit down?
It can change between.
Okay, right. I was going to say, how can you be sitting down and be inverted?
Oh yeah, no. The actual thing shows a different variation to a stand-up coaster. It shows a new type of restraint, which is like a stand-up restraint, but an updated version of it.
So it's a stand-up coaster?
It looks to be.
So what you just said is a lie?
Yeah.
Okay. So they said their favourite was Black Mamba.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting because I remember when we came back from Phantasialand, we said Black Mamba was better than Nemesis.
I don't know if I agree with that
And
anymore.
I'm pretty sure that's on the podcast, so you can't...
Yeah, I don't think I agree with that anymore.
Don't you?
No. I didn't really care for Black Mamba. It
had more stuff going on, though.
In the station and Lift Hill, but then it suffers even more than Nemesis does with the whole you can't see anything on an inverted unless you're...
Yeah.
There was nothing to see.
Yeah.
At all.
There never is on... All you can see is the seat in front of you.
No, I know, but because it's so confined...
You mean like the area?
Yeah,
the
you're
rocks
just
and
in the
everything.
trenches constantly. It kind of... I get the point, but it kind of makes it worse.
Yeah, it's claustrophobic.
But like, sometimes you want that. If it was a sit-down coaster, I think that'd be great.
I think to
because
me...
you just can't... It's... What it is there's no space, but all the space there is filled with other rows. Whereas on a sit-down coaster, you have space above you to kind of absorb what it is. I don't know.
For me, I think it was like... Nemesis is very intense, obviously. And I don't like the G's on it, or whatever they are. Black Mamba had less long periods of intenseness. And it was more enjoyable in that way. But I don't know, because we've only done it 1 or 2 times. I can't remember how many times we did it.
Twice.
Yeah. So it's not really a fair test, considering we've done Nemesis so many times.
Yeah, we didn't ride it Black Mamba in the front because the queue for the front was huge.
Well, understandably. But yeah, interesting.
There you go.
It'd be interesting to see how many more years all the 120 rides last.
You know, this is it. They'll start to go, especially, all the B&M inverts in the 90s.
Yeah.
Will start to get old.
Oh.
We'll see what parks decide, whether to keep them or to get rid of them.
There'll probably still be 100 left in 10 years.
There'll be loads, probably. This is it. We don't really know how long they're going to last.
Yeah.
Until
they die.
This is it.